Very good evening. The 10th anniversary of the 9/11 attacks has been marked with a series of events across the world. In New York, where more than 2,000 people lost their lives, US presidents, past and present, attended ceremonies of remembrance. Dominic Waghorn reflects on the day's events.
To a solemn drumbeat, pipers from New York's fire and police departments marched through Ground Zero, where Presidents Obama and Bush and their wives had earlier met relatives of 9/11's victims. With haunting beauty, a youth choir sung the national anthem. Before the first of 6 moments of silence at the time the first tower was struck. On the 10th anniversary, this was a national event as much as New York's. For the first time, President Obama was here.
We will not fear. Even though the earth be removed, and though the mountains be carried into the midst of the sea.
New York Mayor Michael Bloomberg marked the passing of a decade.
10 years have passed since a perfect blue sky morning turned into the blackest of nights. Since then, we've lived in sunshine and in shadow. And although we can never unsee what happened here, we can also see that children who lost their parents have grown into young adults, grandchildren have been born, and good works and public service have taken root to honor those we loved and lost.
Lee Adler.
Marie Rose Abad.
J. Howard Bolton.
Then the first of 334 readers began reading out the almost 3,000 names of those who died. As moving now as it was on the first anniversary.
Lawson Fisher.
And my uncle, firefighter Gerald Thomas Atwood. We miss you more than words could ever describe.
A dear friend, Lieutenant Harry Wanamaker, FDNY retired. And our courageous son, Wells Remy Crowther, the man in the red bandana.
And my dad, Michael Batch.
And my sister, Melissa Yvette White. We love you, we miss you, and we'll never forget you.
10 years on, children have grown up, able to say with poignant clarity how they feel about the parents they lost.
I was 13 when I stood here in 2003 and read a poem about how much I wanted to break down and cry. Since then, I've stopped crying, but I haven't stopped missing my dad. I wish my dad had been there to teach me how to drive, ask a girl out on a date, and see me graduate from high school.
10 years after he was cheered on Ground Zero, in the days after the attacks, George W. Bush was welcomed again.
President Lincoln not only understood the heartbreak of his country, he also understood the cost of sacrifice and reached out to console those in sorrow. In the fall of 1864, he learned that a widow had lost 5 sons in the Civil War, and he wrote her this letter. Dear Madam, I have been shown in the files of the War Department a statement of the Adjutant General of Massachusetts that you're the mother of 5 sons who have died gloriously on the field of battle. I feel how weak and fruitless must be any words of mine which should attempt to beguile you from the grief of a loss so overwhelming.
As As presidents and politicians left, families of the victims were allowed in to the Memorial Plaza, built over Ground Zero, to find the names of the lost among the thousands etched in bronze parapets above pools sunk exactly where the towers once stood. There's still a sense of shock seeing them, a disbelief the attacks ever happened, despite all that's come since. Debbie Epps, who lost a brother, summed up the feelings of many.
It has been 10 years, and it feels like it just happened yesterday. My brother, Christopher Epps, worked on the 98th floor in the North Tower. Not one holiday, birthday has gone by that my 4 sisters and my brother and I don't think about him.
For the first time this year, the roll call remembered those also killed at the Pentagon in Shanksville, Pennsylvania. And for the first time, moments of silence marked the time planes came down there. The lasting legacy of this anniversary will remain in bronze and in stone. A memorial plaza where people can come and read the names of those who died and feel the huge sense of loss they've left behind. Dominic Waghorn, Sky News, New York.
Well, in London, the Prince of Wales and the Duchess of Cornwall joined relatives of the 67 British victims. White roses, one for each person who died, were laid as part of a memorial service in the garden by the US Embassy. Ashish Joshi reports.
Our beloved son, Vincent Wells, and our dear friend, Simon James Turner.
Our son and Vicky's husband, Stephen Lorne.
In what has become a poignant tradition on every 9/11 anniversary, family members are invited to read out the names of their loved ones before laying a single white rose in their memory.
Our beloved son, Paul Gary Bristow.
Michael William Lomax. Mark Gavin Ludvigsen.
Michelle Beale, Jane Beatty, Graham Barclay, and my sister, Surya Clark.
Each of the names of the British victims are inscribed inside a pavilion at the September 11 Memorial Garden in Grosvenor Square. A garden was selected as a memorial because many of the bereaved have no graves to mark their loss. And it was here families and friends joined politicians and royalty to remember those who perished. Prince Charles and Camilla were asked to attend this ceremony by the September 11 UK Family Support Group because of their close links with the families.
For is it not strange that although that dreadful act of violence was meant to divide us, it has actually drawn us together. One person to another, one community to another, as it has today. On this anniversary, we are drawn to you in our thoughts and in our prayers, knowing that we cannot change the past, but that through struggling to find a light that can lighten our darkness, we may ultimately bring the healing the world so desperately needs.
A day of reflection and remembrance began with the simple lighting of a candle. Here inside the Grosvenor Chapel, a church used by US servicemen during World War II, a sombre memorial that would set the tone for this day. At St. Paul's, the service of commemoration prayed for the many lives lost 10 years ago. There were 67 British victims that day, after America, the most for any country. Outside the historic cathedral, English firefighters remembered their fallen American colleagues. Close to 400 of the emergency workers walked to their deaths on that fateful day. Prince Charles said in his speech, this dreadful act of violence meant to divide, but instead it actually drew communities together. That belief would have been shared by many today. Ashish Joshi, Sky News, at the September 11 Memorial Garden in London.
The events in central London were marred slightly by clashes between far-right protesters and Muslim demonstrators. A number of radical Islamic groups gathered outside the US Embassy to make anti-American speeches and burn a US flag. A counter-demonstration by the English Defence League resulted in scuffles with police. Several arrests were made.